Think about the last time you walked into an IKEA. You went in for one thing: a lamp, a shelf, maybe just a picture frame. And somehow, an hour and a half later, you walked out with a cart full of candles, storage bins, a rug you didn't know you needed, and a plate of meatballs in your stomach. That's not a coincidence. That's not bad self-control. That's a system engineered down to the arrow on the floor, designed specifically to make that exact thing happen to you every single time. It's called the Gruen Effect, and IKEA didn't invent it. They just perfected it more completely than any retailer on earth. There is no shortcut from the entrance to the exit. There are no windows, no clocks, nothing to tell your brain how much time has actually passed. You are, by design, walking through roughly a kilometer of curated fantasy before you're allowed to leave. Here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. While you're busy getting quietly disoriented in aisle after aisle of showroom furniture, the company doing this to you isn't technically owned by anyone. No shareholders, no public stock ticker, no single family collecting the profits in any straightforward way. IKEA is controlled by a Dutch foundation, a legal structure that, in the eyes of the law, owns itself. And at one point, that foundation was ranked the wealthiest charity on the entire planet, sitting on an endowment worth tens of billions of dollars. Its annual charitable giving? A little over 1 million euros a year. A furniture company that psychologically engineers your shopping trip, down to the smell of the food court, hiding behind a charitable structure that barely gives anything away. Both of those facts are true, and almost nobody connects them. In this case study, we're decoding both halves of the empire, the maze that's been quietly reprogramming your buying decisions since the moment you walked in, and the foundation sitting above it all, one so effective at avoiding taxes and takeovers that European regulators are still investigating it as we speak in 2026. Welcome to Empire Blueprint. This is the store built to make you lose track of time, and the charity built to make sure nobody can ever take it away. Let's start with the walk itself, because almost every square foot of an IKEA store was designed by someone who studied exactly how your brain behaves under mild disorientation. The principle is called the Gruen Effect, named after Victor Gruen, the architect who designed America's first enclosed shopping mall in the 1950s. Gruen noticed something almost by accident. When people walk into a large, disorienting space, they eventually give up trying to navigate with intention. Ironically, Gruen himself came to oppose this kind of manipulation later in his career. Retailers didn't listen. IKEA took that observation and built an entire store format around it. Instead of letting you wander freely the way most stores are designed, so you can grab what you need and leave, IKEA built what's known as a fixed path layout. One route in, one route out. Shortcuts exist, but they're deliberately unmarked and easy to miss. Most retail stores expose the average shopper to only about a third of their total merchandise. IKEA's fixed path pushes that number dramatically higher because the only way out genuinely runs past almost everything they sell. Then there's The sensory design. No windows. No clocks. The same technique casinos have used for decades to strip away your sense of elapsed time, so your internal urgency to leave never quite kicks in. Along the route, IKEA deploys what insiders call the bulla bulla technique, cheap items piled loosely into bins, creating a visual sense of abundance and bargain hunting that triggers impulse grabs almost automatically. Floor arrows subtly hand over your decision-making, guiding you turn by turn, without you ever consciously choosing the route. Researchers estimate that roughly half of all retail purchases across the industry broadly are unplanned. IKEA didn't invent that psychology. They just built a 50,000 square foot building, specifically engineered to trigger it over and over for every single customer who walks through the door. Here's a detail that sounds like a throwaway fact, but is actually one of IKEA's most calculated business decisions. The meatballs. IKEA's in-store restaurants aren't a side business tacked onto the furniture stores. According to the company's own research, roughly 30% of shoppers say they come to IKEA specifically to eat, not to buy furniture at all. By 2017, food sales alone brought in over $2 billion, making IKEA one of the 10 largest food retailers on the planet, restaurant chains included. But the real genius isn't the revenue from the food itself. It's what the food does to you psychologically, and where it's placed. Eating triggers a dopamine response, a genuine, measurable boost in mood and comfort. IKEA places its cafeteria roughly halfway through the fixed path, right at the point where shoppers are physically tired and mentally worn down from navigating the maze. The meatballs aren't just a meal. They're a reset button timed precisely to re-energize you for the second half of the store, the half that leads directly into the marketplace hall, packed with exactly the kind of small, cheap, impulse-friendly items the bulla bulla bins are built around. Then there's the distance effect. For many shoppers, an IKEA trip means driving 30 minutes, an hour, sometimes more, specifically because there are so few locations relative to how many people shop there. That inconvenience does something subtle to your psychology. If you've already invested the drive, walking out empty-handed starts to feel like wasting the entire trip. The meatballs make the smaller purchases feel justified, a reward for the effort, not just a menu item. Put together, the food isn't a separate business from the furniture. It's structurally part of the same system, a mood management tool disguised as a cafeteria, positioned at exactly the moment your resistance to spending is lowest. And that's just the shopping experience. The stranger story is who actually owns all of it. In 1943, a 17-year-old named Ingvar Kamprad started selling pens and picture frames from a shed in rural Sweden. By 1982, with IKEA already a continental retail force, he did something almost no founder in history has done with a company that large. He gave it away to a foundation of his own creation. Stichting INGKA Foundation, registered in the Netherlands, is what's called a stichting under Dutch law, a legal entity that has no members, no shareholders, and no owners. It exists purely to pursue whatever purpose its founding charter declares. Kamprad transferred 100% of his equity in IKEA into it, irrevocably. On paper, that sounds like an extraordinary act of generosity. In practice, the structure did three very specific things at once. It shielded the company from ever being taken over, since a foundation with no owners can't be bought out from under itself. It dramatically reduced the tax burden on Kamprad's fortune, since the wealth technically belonged to a charitable entity rather than a person. And it kept the Kamprad family closely connected to the money regardless. The foundation paid the family well, even as the underlying company could never legally be sold. The scale of the resulting entity is almost hard to comprehend. The Economist once calculated the foundation's value at over $35 billion, ranking it the wealthiest charitable foundation on the planet at the time. Larger than the Gates Foundation, larger than the Wellcome Trust. More recent estimates put its assets closer to $60 billion. And its annual charitable output? 4 years, reporting pegged it at a little over €1 million a year, directed mostly toward a single Swedish engineering institute. Proportionally, one of the least generous major foundations in the world, holding one of the largest endowments. Kamprad himself, when pressed by Swedish documentary filmmakers, didn't dress it up. He called the whole arrangement simply a natural part of the company's low-cost culture. Here's where the structure gets genuinely intricate, and where it starts colliding with regulators in real time, right now, in 2026. Stichting INGKA Foundation doesn't actually own the IKEA brand itself. It owns Inca Holding, which owns Inca Group, the company that runs the large majority of physical IKEA stores worldwide. The brand name, the store concept, the entire product range, sits in a completely separate structure. IKEA Systems, the worldwide franchisor. Every single IKEA store on Earth, including the ones operated by Inca Group itself, pays IKEA Systems a franchise fee equal to 3% of turnover just for the right to trade under the IKEA name. 2 foundations, 2 separate revenue streams, 1 brand. IKEA, in turn, is controlled through yet another foundation, the Interogo Foundation, based in Liechtenstein, a jurisdiction known for exceptionally strict corporate secrecy laws. This layered structure hasn't gone unnoticed. The European Commission has an active state aid investigation into IKEA's tax arrangements, examining whether the company received illegal preferential tax treatment through its Dutch and Luxembourg structures. As of early 2026, that case remains genuinely open. The Commission has not issued a final ruling. For context on how seriously the EU treats these cases, Apple's similar tax arrangement case with Ireland was eventually upheld at the Court of Justice in 2024 after Apple was ordered to pay back roughly €13 billion. Reporting at the time of IKEA's initial 2017 investigation estimated a potential recovery if the arrangements were ultimately found to constitute illegal aid of as much as €1 billion. Whatever the final ruling turns out to be, the underlying architecture has already done its job for over 4 decades, keeping IKEA impossible to buy, difficult to tax, at full rate, and almost entirely shielded from the scrutiny that follows a normal, publicly traded company. So, a maze that manipulates your shopping behavior, and a foundation structure that shields the company from taxes and takeovers. What do they actually have in common? Everything. Both systems exist for the exact same reason: control disguised as something friendlier. Lesson 1. The best behavioral design doesn't feel like manipulation while it's happening. Nobody walking through an IKEA store feels tricked in a moment. They feel like they're browsing, discovering, treating themselves. The most effective psychological systems are the ones that feel like your own choice. Lesson 2. Structure determines what pressure a company has to respond to. Just like the Hermes family building H51 to block a hostile takeover, Kamprad's foundation structure permanently removed IKEA from the reach of shareholders, activist investors, or a competitor buyout. The company answers to its own founding charter, and almost nothing else. Lesson 3. Calling something a charity doesn't require it to behave like one. The INGKA Foundation earned the label of world's wealthiest charity while giving away a genuinely tiny fraction of its assets. A reminder that legal structures and their names can diverge from what the average person assumes they mean. Most people who've walked through an IKEA maze, eaten the meatballs, and driven home with more than they plan to buy have no idea any of this sits underneath the experience. That's not an accident either. The entire system, the store layout and the corporate structure both, was built to be effective specifically by staying invisible. Next time you find yourself lost in aisle after aisle of showroom furniture, you'll know exactly why, and who technically owns none of it. If this changed how you'll see your next IKEA trip, subscribe to Empire Blueprint. We decode empires so you can build your own. One question before you go: is this brilliant business design, or does a structure like this deserve more scrutiny than it gets? Tell us below. This was Empire Blueprint.